if you've not gone upstairs to see the art, take a little tour. It's very, very lovely. Thank you for having us back, St. Botolph, as well. Tonight is our 14th HistoryMaker Awards. We began to present the awards back in 2009 because we felt that activists in our community deserved recognition and gratitude for their work. History is not just about the past, but what we do is part of the LGBTQ+ community every day. Queer people are part of Boston's past and present, but also Boston's future. And it's our job to preserve, protect, and share our history for future generations to learn from and be inspired by. This year is an election year. Make sure you pick up your vote button. And not to mince words, but what we are doing as an organization and what we're celebrating tonight is what far-right extremists and politicians are afraid of. We are historians, librarians, memory workers, archivists, and they want to label us pornographers, they want to censor us, and they don't want us to tell our stories and our truths. So, no matter what happens in November, because of your support, the History Project's not going anywhere. We're all here together because of the work of the history makers who came before us, and we are still doing the work as a community to create a world that protects and upholds our rights as LGBTQ+ people. THP is doing this work to ensure that everyone has access to our stories and our histories. So this year, I will say, while right now it may seem like politics happen on a national level, on a local level, we've had the opportunity to help shape this world. The History Project's been working with Representative John Moran's office to support a bill currently working its way through the State House to protect public libraries and librarians from attempts to ban books. Woo! We're also represented on Boston's 400th Commemoration Commission to ensure that LGBTQ history is celebrated as part of Boston's history. And this past year, we've partnered extensively with the Boston Public Library to bring queer history to Boston's communities across the city. And we're really excited for some upcoming events, but we gotta get through tonight first. LGBTQ+ History Month is just weeks away. And I just want to take a moment to thank Matisse DuPont, who's right here. Matisse is THP's program coordinator, and they are amazing, and they have taken our programs to the next level and have expanded our work. And we've held over 20 programs so far this year, and we have a dozen more to do. So Matisse, thank you so much. And all of you, show up to these events. So, the other thing we've done, we've continued our work to document, preserve, and share LGBTQ+ history. We've had donations to the archives documenting our experiences through collections of books, through donations of pieces of journalism, from records of organizations like the Chiltern Mountain Club. Anyone a hiker? There we go. We're bringing in some Chiltern records. And oral histories. This year we have oral histories from the women from the Daughters of Bilitis, writers and editors of Gay Community News. And we also have a forthcoming donation of photographs taken by artist Lowell Poor documenting the experiences of people living with HIV and AIDS. We also created a crowdsourced project to document 20 years of marriage equality. So if you in the back of the room, and if you have a marriage story to share, we have a link for you to share it. So each of these donations and collections is a safeguard against those who want to erase us. We have always been here, and we will always be here. So I want to share that History Project is growing thanks to a grant from the City of Boston's Community Preservation Act office. We'll soon be joined by a processing and digitization archivist. Woo! And all of our work and our progress has only happened and can only happen with the support of our community. So your presence here tonight is vital, especially during this backlash against queer visibility and equality. Here's the pitch. During tonight's program, you'll have the opportunity to make a donation to the History Project. There's a QR code on your program. Ooh. Technology, people. And I hope the stories that you'll hear tonight will inspire you to keep supporting our work and to keep telling your stories. So it's now my pleasure to award our 2024 Lavender Rhino Award to Ariel Gray and Sierra Michelle Peters, the co-founders of Print Ain't Dead. I met Ariel back in 2019 when she came to the archives to do research for a series of Pride articles for WBUR. And one of her stories highlighted the history of the lavender rhino. So if you don't know it, you can find it because she wrote it. And another article highlighted the history of the Combahee River Collective and their impacts not only on Boston, but on Black contemporary feminism as a whole. Print Ain't Dead has served Boston's community as a pop-up bookstore, as a publishing platform focused on literary and text-based artifacts produced by Black, Brown, and Indigenous artists since 2018. And their work provides access to literature and signal boosts the work of writers, artists, philosophers, storytellers, poets, and more by eliminating barriers to access. They sell new and used books, and most recently, their project, Combahee's Library, created a pop-up reading room offering new and used books penned by people of color to residents in outdoor spaces in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. So Ariel and Sierra's work continues the lineage of the women of the Combahee River Collective and of the women of Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, who would also pop up tables across the city to bring works written by women of color directly to the people. So you're out there doing so much work, and thank you so much for all of that work. And I'm so honored to present you with this award tonight. Here. Do you want a photo? Oh, here you go. And then I can take it back so we don't break it.
One, two, three. Ooh. One more. 1, 2, 3. Gorgeous. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But that's the small one.
Oh, yeah.
Put it on your chair.
Is that Demita?
Yeah.
Hi, Demita.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I am, as Joan just said, I am Ariel. I am one half of Print Ain't Dead, along with Sierra Peters, and we are so honored to accept this award. Words really can't describe how it feels to be seen by all of you for the work that we do here in Boston. I'm gonna try to keep this pretty short. I timed myself when I did this earlier, and it was only like around 4 minutes, so I'm gonna try to do this quick. It can be a little bit hard to describe who we are and what we do. We sell books at low prices at our small reading room and bookstore in Hyde Park. We've worked with authors of color to print zines. We had the pleasure of working with Demita Frazier and the BCA on Combahee's Radical Call, which was a multimodal exhibit centering the history of Black feminism here in Boston. We have a flagship program called the Black Feminist Study Hall that we run in collaboration with Dr. Joan. Let me make sure I say doctor. She worked real hard for it. And that program uses Black feminist texts to catalyze dialogue about what liberation looks like. However, despite the work that we do, Print Ain't Dead should not exist. We dream of a world where literature is accessible to all, not just to borrow, but to own. We dream of a world where queer and trans writers are celebrated and highlighted. We dream of a world without book bans and without censorship. And in this dream world, there would be no pressing needs for our organization to address. But we're still working towards that world, and so Print Ain't Dead was born. Sierra and I are both from Boston, the Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan area, and in 2018 we sat down at Dudley Cafe and we talked and we realized that we only had one bookstore serving all of these communities, and that was a problem for us. And we realized growing up, we actually had no bookstores in our areas at all. Beyond the lack of bookstores, we also knew that buying books is expensive. And for a lot of people in our communities, that was keeping them from buying books, purchasing books, and building their own libraries at home, which we feel is really important. And on top of that, the publishing industry is not only hard to navigate, but historically and also contemporarily, they do not do a good job at publishing and promoting queer and trans authors. We created Print Ain't Dead to serve a need that we knew existed. We know that having bookstores run by people from marginalized identities is pertinent. We know that being able to access liberatory and radical material is important. Not only does it expand the imagination, it shows people that change is a possibility. We know these things are important because the FBI spent years in the 60s monitoring Black and brown, queer, and feminist bookstores. And they were afraid that these spaces would become hotspots for dispersing revolutionary literature. And they were right. They also monitored small and underground presses, and Kitchen Table Press, as Joan mentioned, was started here in Boston in the 80s by Combahee River Collective member Beverly Smith. And they published books by and about women from marginalized identities. And they said that press is a revolutionary tool because it is one means of empowering society's most dispossessed people, who also have the greatest potential for making change. They are afraid of us. They're afraid of our protests, of our marches, of our grassroots organizations. They're afraid of our bookstores and printing presses. They're afraid of us remembering the past. And they should be, because after years and years of surveillance, of concerted efforts to break up our movements and businesses, of arrests and censorship, those same ideas they tried to kill are still here. We are still here. So if there's anything to know or remember about us, it's that Print Ain't Dead comes from this lineage of resistance and refusal. We are not the first to do what we do, and we won't be the last. We are merely stewards for the time that we're here, and we're doing this work in the hopes that it allows the ones who come after us to continue to dream up a world where we are free. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And yeah, it's my honor to be able to, for us, the History Project, to be able to even to highlight the work that you're doing, because it is so important and it is so needed. And yeah, anyway, on a personal note, I'm very proud and I'm very happy that you're here today with us. Anyway, I'm a dork, you guys. So now we have THB's co-chairs, Carissa Cunningham and Ben Federland.
Thank you so much to Ariel and Sierra. My name's Ben Federland.
I'm Carissa Cunningham.
And we are the interim co-chairs of the History Project. We're here just to thank a few people this evening. I specifically want to acknowledge some previous HistoryMaker and Lavender Rhino Award winners who are in the room tonight. So if there's anyone else who won the award previously, if you wouldn't mind standing up to be acknowledged. I think members of the Sisters of Professional Development are here. Gary Bailey is here. So thank you all for being here. I also want to thank our planning committee and event volunteers, including Matisse and Joan, Andrew Elder, Tony Grima, Anna Kolesova, Theo Linger, Sean McGuffey, Kim Ortega, and Paula Fredericks. Thank you for your time and dedication to creating this wonderful evening. Also like to thank OJ Slaughter for photographing tonight's event, and Kylie Terra for recording. Thank you both so much. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge my fellow board members, Libby Bouvier, Jonathan Shu, Andrew Elder, Taylor Felicody Lardman, Tony Grima, Marvin Kabakoff, Dory Klein, Russ Lopez, Sean McGuffey, and Carissa Cunningham.
So those of you board members who are here tonight, please go ahead and wave or take a bow. They're all in the back.
Very generous.
Anyone else who's here tonight should corner one of these folks to have an interesting conversation and to learn more about the work that the History Project does. And I am grateful to be on the board with all of you. I also want to note that, like many people in this room, I am in awe of the work of our wonderful executive director, Joan Ilacqua. Joan was the very first staff member of the History Project, and she took the helm of the organization in January 2020, which was a really cool time.
It was a great time for nonprofits.
It was a great time for nonprofits, and Joan took the bull by the horns and has really brought us to great places in the past 4 years and shown herself to be a really thoughtful and courageous leader, a very fierce advocate for the History Project, for our values and our mission, and a vocal champion of our community and our community stories. So please join me in thanking Joan for all of her work. Joan may have mentioned earlier that we now have a staff of 2. And we will be adding a 3rd, which is very exciting. Now I want to thank the supporters, donors, and friends who have made tonight possible. First, our 2024 host committee, Kevin Hepner, Pat Gozemba, and Karen Kahn, Russ Lopez, and Andrew Sherman, Andrew Elder, and Jose Ricky McFaline Figueroa, Tony Grima and Peter Muise, Martin Kabakoff, Stewart Landers, Sarah Marina and Joan Ilacqua, Martha Stone, Jessica Taylor, and Anna Wilson. Thanks to you all. And I've got one more list to read. I want to recognize and thank the sponsors of tonight's event: Eastern Bank, Microsoft Gleam, the Theater Offensive, yes, Mass Equality, and the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition. We love them all in unique and special ways. We've had strong relationships with these organizations over the years, and I'm really grateful to them for their continued support and for the work they do to support our community. So please join me in giving a round of applause to everyone who has made tonight possible.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Ben and Carissa, for your work and for reading all of the thank yous. I'm just saying this. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone, and if I did, I love you the most. That's why you're not there. Anyway, sorry, I'm giddy. Before I introduce our HistoryMaker honorees, I just want to once again thank all of you, all of our supporters, sponsors, volunteers, and board members. We're here because we're committed to preserving and sharing the powerful stories of our community. And it's because of our history makers and supporters like you that we can continue this vital work. To ensure that this work is protected and inspires future generations, we need your help. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a real difference, whether that is $50 to help rehouse a collection with acid-free folders, archivists, acid-free folders, $250 to to fund educational programs or $1,000 to help collect and preserve new stories, your generosity directly fuels our mission. So, once again, you have a QR code on your program. And, or if you don't like QR codes, our volunteer Theo, who is all the way at the back, has a credit card reader and my cell phone. So you can flag down Theo and he can help you. But anyway, now it's my pleasure to introduce our 2024 HistoryMaker honoree, the Combahee River Collective. So, I am a historian. Yes, everyone applause. So I have a short story to tell. I learned about the Combahee River Collective in college during a history class. It was about the long 60s. This idea for people who are interested in historiography, a lot of times the 60s is looked at as, it begins with JFK and it ends with Nixon. And we know that history is a lot more nuanced than this mainstream narrative that would lead you to believe. So in this class, we read about the Combahee River Collective. We read about the 1977 Combahee River Collective Statement. There are copies all over the place, so if you don't have a copy, pick one up. If you do have a copy, pick one up and give it to a friend. And we learned about the roots of intersectionality, the work that this group did to support one another, to define their own politics within and outside of feminist, gay, and Black liberation movements. And so I believe our history and our stories should be directly accessible to the public. It is wild that I had to go to college in Washington State to learn about the history of my own city. And so I'm so proud that we as an organization can be here in community night with all of you and with Demita Frazier and Sharon Page Ritchie, honoring the deep and lasting impact and legacy of the Combahee River Collective.
So my name is Sharon Page Ritchie, and I am going to talk to you for just a moment about the Combahee River Collective retreats, which were a separate activity of the Boston-based Combahee River Collective, and about my long friendship with Demita Frazier, who I'm happy to be able to introduce to you tonight. Demita and I met in Chicago, where we had grown up. We were probably 19 as very young Black feminists, Black lesbian feminists. And we had an early connection around a lot of different things. One of the things was around dance and movement, in addition to, of course, our experiences with growing up as Black lesbian feminists in a segregated city of Chicago. I think the thing that I want to tell you about the retreats is that they were a separate offshoot of the collective, which was based in Boston. There were probably 3 or 4 retreats per year for several years in the late 1970s. That's one of the things I want to look up so that I can tell people the exact dates and so on. But we met in largely donated spaces, people's houses, in and around DC, in and around Boston. New Haven, I think, might have been the very first one. So these were gatherings of the core collective members, as well as friends and acquaintances from other places. I think coming from Chicago, I was probably the farthest west, but other women from up and down the East Coast. There was a lot of, that was one of the places where the statement, I think, was developed and workshopped. We had a lot of exciting and engaged conversations about what did it mean. And I think this whole question about intersectionality was one of the things that we talked about. It was part of our lived experience. So how were we going to talk about it and put it into words for other people who did not have that same experience? I think another thing that was crucial for me about the retreats was there were lots and lots of amazing writers and lots of amazing writing going on. In addition to the conversations that we had, there were people would share their work and what they were doing. And I was one of the few who was doing work that was not writing based. So I am a dancer, and I have been since I, was little. And so I shared a dance performance. And I also did do a little bit of, kind of exercise, yoga, stretching kind of thing. And that was, it was a challenge, I think, for some of our more heady writers. Another thing to think about there was it was really kind of a global experience. In addition to, the overtly, obviously political topics, we also spent a lot of time, we had to eat. We were there for a long weekend, and so we had to eat. And one of Demita's many good qualities is that she's a fabulous cook. So we had not only really good food, we also had discussions about food and about farming and about where does the food come from and what kinds of things are good for us to eat and what kinds of things are not good for us to eat, and what are the, the political and economic forces shaping how and what we eat, how we feed ourselves, how we nurture ourselves. So those are a couple of quick things that I can talk to you about with the retreats. I will be happy, I don't know that there's a forum for this, but if there are questions, I'm happy to talk to people. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you Demita Frazier, whom I have known for many decades. I would say that she is a lifelong activist for the flourishing of Black women. And I am very happy to have met her those many years ago and to see that she continues to do amazing work. So, Demita Frazier, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Oh, well, am I on?
Almost.
Can you hear me?
Almost. Ta-da! There you are, Demita.
Wonderful. First of all, I want to thank my friend Sharon for really, it's amazing when we think about the fact that it's more than 50 years that we've known each other. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the long stream of experience that precedes Combahee and precedes our young lives, because we harken back to all the people who had contributed to our understanding of a nascent Black feminism, many of the writers, philosophers who truly gave us the seeds that we were able to plant once we became young women activists in the 60s and 70s. One of the things that I wanted to also say is that even though Combahee came together at the point that it did, and we wrote the statement in the 70s, preceding that, and I want to say this to Sharon, and I talked about this briefly before we began, one of the things that we discovered that we were interested in when we first met was this idea of how we do consciousness raising amongst Black women at the time. And I'll never forget, one of the first meetings that we had was in Sharon Ritchie's kitchen, where we had a small group of Black women. And in the middle of talking about very, simple sort of, we're Black feminists and subjects, it was the first glimmer of people talking about some of the things that went on in their families. And we did have two young women who were part of our little cohort who told us the story about the domestic violence they were experiencing at the hands of a stepfather, and their plans for his demise. They had come up with an entire plan for getting rid of him, and we were supportive of that idea, although not the criminal aspect. But they raised an issue that, as you can remember, in the early 1970s, there were no groups founded, there were no battered women's shelters. Even the subject of domestic violence was really very quiet as it's kept. And so even then, we were talking about important subjects that, in fact, touched all of our lives. And I say that because one of the things that we had to come to grips with over time is that domestic violence wasn't just isolated in heterosexual relationships. It was amongst lesbian women and gay men. these are issues that were not really being talked about. We didn't really have a venue for it. But it's important just to note that in the beginning, we'd always talked about issues that touch human lives. So what I'd like to also say is that Polly Marshall, there's just so many names I could come up with, but Polly Marshall in chief was such an influence on me because not only was she a writer, she was, in fact, an ordained minister, I found that fascinating that she found a place in the church for herself. She was androgynous. She was definitely not really someone who was easily defined, and brilliant. And for so many reasons, we recognize that she, along with several other Black women, gave us a foundation from which to begin to have these very difficult conversations about what it would mean for us to organize ourselves. Sharon and I want to just we talked about this briefly. The thing that we really, as young lesbians and people say young queer people because we have to include the fact that we've come out of many closets. Sharon and I went to a meeting of Chicago Gay and Lesbian Liberation, and I will never forget this experience because it reminded me that there's no safe space if there's no safe space. We go to the meeting, it's in Old Town on Wells Avenue. It's in the attic of an old building. We get there, it's just me and Sharon and two white gay men. The meeting was just starting, we were very much on time. We walked in the room, and before even saying hello, one of the men said, "Can you tell me what bleeds for 5 days and doesn't die?" I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know that joke, but we knew by the way, their tone and everything that, oh, okay, this is misogyny. Didn't call it that, but it was clearly misogyny. So we just left. We didn't even bother trying to talk with them. So there was an example right there of the lack of space for the fullness of who we were as a community, allegedly, only to be confronted by that misogyny. Another experience that I had early on, was meeting up with a group of drag queens who were in that same neighborhood. I was a political activist. I was 16 years old. This is also before Sharon and I met. One of them turned to me sitting in this breakfast place, it was like 2 a.m., and said, "You know something? Here's why you don't like us. Because we look better than you." Again, I had to stop and think. Okay, so my little innocent self coming there to try to be a part of something, I was immediately told that there was something that wasn't going to work out. Then finally, we began to talk as Black feminists in the middle 70s. As you know, Combahee was preceded in form by the National Black Feminist Organization. And it was an organization that was developed by people like Margaret Sloan and other Black feminists whose names, some of them have been lost. But they started the organization. Margaret charged me and several other people around the country for starting chapters of it. And we figured out that this was the ideal thing for us to do because we were all political activists. We wanted to be engaged in coalition building, and we knew that we had a place in our large African American community. We were really unwilling to be excised and to be exiled by the Black people. And so Barbara Smith, Beverly Smith, myself, and another Sharon, whose name also I always forget her name, but let's call her Sharon Ritchie, another Sharon, we started meeting to talk about how we could create this chapter. And after maybe 5 or 6 months, it became clear that Barbara, Beverly, and I particularly felt that NBFO was a fairly conventionally designed organization. It had a hierarchy. It was not based in any kind of collectivity. And there was no racial economical analysis. There was nothing that related to looking at socialism as a way of approaching ending poverty, thinking about how we share resources, et cetera. So we started and proceeded to then evolve. And one thing I was going to say is that actually, Sharon, we had retreats all across the country. If you remember, we actually had one in California, thanks to you, because you had moved there. And so we gathered together through the retreats some brilliant minds, some very unusual people across all kinds of generational spread. And not only did the retreats become places for us to collude and think and scheme, it also in many ways showed us what were the schisms amongst us even then. We had educational privilege issues. We had issues that related to what does it mean when you are part of the African diaspora? Does it mean as an Afro-Latina, do you have a place here? Yes, you do. Does it mean if you're African, do you have a place here? Yes, you do. And so we expanded ourselves to really think about what it meant to be a Black woman and a Black feminist, and what it meant to be Black lesbian feminists as well. I would like to say that it was not simple. There are many lessons to be learned from the ways in which we were capable and able to really engage in the work of movement building. And also, because we were so devoted in Boston to this idea of being involved in coalition work, we worked across all sorts of lines. The late Chuck Turner was part of an organization that was looking at the ways in which African Americans were prohibited from joining unions, trade unions principally. And we pushed our way into that organization. He was extremely respectful, and we went to picket lines. We walked with them. We ended up doing a lot of work, again, across the lines to make coalition, because one of the things we recognized early on is that African Americans are a small body within the large body politic of this country. We also felt that the issues of domestic violence, reproductive rights. I remember a woman said to me once, you're lesbians. Why do you care about reproductive rights? It's because it involves women. That's why. She accepted that answer, fortunately. So there we were. And we were part of the group of community folk who got together to form Casa Mirna Vasquez, which is now the largest battered women's shelter in the greater Boston area, maybe even on the East Coast. So wherever we felt there was a need for our presence, we made our presence known. And we did not let homophobia stop us from joining with others who really needed to see that as African American women of every kind of sexuality, that we had a firm place in the firmament of what it meant to be Black activists. The one thing I will also say is that when we wrote the statement, and then in 1981, we separated. One of the most important things that we left each other with was the idea that we were able to come together across so many internal differences and create this piece of work that apparently really has legs and has been read and analyzed and used as a foundational document in many movements. And I also want to say one of the things that's evolved over time for me anyway, and Sharon, I think you might concur, it was wonderful to find men, Black men and other men who weren't Black, who understood intersectionality and understood the need to have an analysis of how they're going to approach their lives that included an analysis of racism and structural racism. It also meant that we had a chance to work with people who were confronting and thinking about the ways in which even amongst white women and women of color, we have these barriers that related to race and gender and also class. So in that way, it stimulated conversations that began to get at what kept us from being a community, and has to this day, we still struggle, I feel like, in our LGBTQIA plus community to be a community. We are communities. I see us as being multiple, sometimes disparate, sometimes not. But I also think that we still have a lot of work to do because we are also living in political times when coalitions amongst progressive and left and radical people are so necessary to our survival in this benighted country of ours. So I'm feeling very hopeful. As always, you can't be an activist and not have hope. I feel very proud to have been a part of something that was not about the individual persons, but was more about how can we make a politic that is inclusive of the people to whom it is important and for whom it is meant to be. So I can't thank you enough for this award. I'm not a big award person, as many people who are there will know about me. I really like putting my shoulder to the wheel and doing the work and keeping my head down. But this was really special, and I I can't thank you folks enough. So thank you again so much, history.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Here. I can't break it before I give it to her. Thank you, Demita, so much for your words and for your work, and thank you, Sharon, so much for being here and for being part of tonight. Sharon, and we got to talk to Sharon on the phone like yesterday, so thank you so much for coming in and being part of this, and I get to close us out. So tonight we've just heard such powerful stories of our community's resilience, courage, triumphs, joys, and the History Project is dedicated to preserving this history. We're preserving stories that have been too often erased or forgotten. Quick poll, how many folks learned something new about our history tonight? Beautiful. That's what we like to see. So, 1, tell your friends what you learned. Keep spreading the word. It's really your presence and your ability to share our stories with your own network, with our community, helps us in this fight to remember and honor our history. These stories deserve to be heard and must be saved for future generations. So once again, thank you for your support of our work and our history. I want to leave you with 2 things in mind. 1, vote.
Yes.
Vote. Tell your family to vote if they're cool. If they're not cool, talk to them about it. Pick up, we have vote buttons here tonight. Pick up some extras and give them to your friends. That's one of the few things I can tell you to do as somebody who works for a nonprofit. And 2, help us preserve our history. So we're always interested to hear from you about donating materials to the archives, about being interviewed for oral histories, or volunteer and learn how to do oral histories with your friends. You can do that too. And check out that QR code. And if it's not your thing, Theo's back there still. So go say hi to Theo. And that's that. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. Have some drinks and some snacks, and have a wonderful night. Thank you all.